Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Coming Out Stories from India series. Coming out. So, coming out is a term used primarily in the LGBT community when a queer person shares about their sexual orientation, usually with friends and family. Nikhil and I decided to launch these Coming Out Stories from India to ensure we all work together, in changing the narrative. The last few years, since my own coming out, I've been looking for role models, stories that can help me in my own journey. And guess what? There were hardly any, and if at all, not in depth enough. There's a common thread running across the narratives, though. The journey has been challenging for many of us. However, we also discovered that not all stories are that of pain, suffering, and trauma either. Our coming out stories from India started taking shape as we started discovering that we do need role models, to bring to our audiences real people, lived experiences, keeping in mind, though, the unique complexities of India. Hopefully, these coming out stories can help pave the way for those who are in any phase of their coming out journey. I'm Raga Olga D'silva, or Totally Out Now, as you know me. Well, our guest today. I've known our guest today for a while, and she brings in a lot of, humor to this world. Very interesting person. She is an all-rounder. She's a triathlete. She's an environmentalist and a recipient of some very prestigious awards. A very, very well-known face in the comedy circuit. Please join me in welcoming Vasu Primlani.
Hi.
Hey, Vasu, how are you doing?
Good. Good.
I thought you're going to make one of those grand entries as you do on stage.
Yeah, that would probably involve some walking.
Okay, well, so I just thought and first of all, thank you for joining us on our coming out stories. It's very important for us to have stories such as yours.
Sure.
And I want to start at the start. We all talk about, we look at, the lens that we look from. We say Vasu is so successful. She's so fantastic. She's so out there. So, Vasu, what I want to do is I want to take you back into your childhood. And I want us to, I know, and that's so beautiful, I think, part of our lives. And I want to understand, how were your formative years like? Were you in India at that time?
Yeah, I was in India at the time, and I grew up in a Christian school. It's called a convent, I believe. And it was an all-girls school. So when you have like a single gender school, there are crushes that happen anyway. Um, and my crushes were mostly on my teachers, um, which continues to this day, actually. But um, yeah, yeah. So growing up in Delhi at the time, we had no concept of sexuality. Period. You know, and certainly not of alternative sexuality. So when I was growing up, when I was attracted to women, I thought if I'm attracted to women, I must be a boy. And I thought I was the only person in the world who thought that way because
Wow.
we had no examples of alternative sexualities. When I grew up a little bit, became a teenager and realized the concept, I remember there was some distant cousin who came to visit and said, she was younger, and she said that, what is it? What is a lesbian? I can't ask my parents, and my friends don't know. So I told her that's the concept at the time, even though as a teenager I had crushes, I was attracted to women. And in some cases, I did act on it in a fledgling sort of way. I didn't think I was, because there's no term for it. I mean, you can't say that that object is a glass if you don't know what a glass is, you know? So it was growing in me, and but I didn't know what to call it. So and when I grew up further, I probably thought there was something wrong with me, and it's a secret, and I shouldn't share with anybody.
Wow, this is a common thread, Vasu, that I keep hearing about. But I'm going to take you further again back to what you said. You said something very interesting. You went to a all-girls school, of course, that's what you're saying, and
Hmm.
you had crushes on your teacher. So I just want to clarify, when you said you had crushes on a teacher, you meant a female teacher, right?
Oh
Because
yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
because
Female teachers.
yeah,
Yeah,
because a convent would have both, right?
right. We did have male teachers. That's
Male
right.
teachers.
But
Yeah.
as you can see, they don't even feature in my memory or imagination to any significant extent.
Two of us makes it two of us. Okay.
Invisible.
So, but
Yeah.
tell me, how was it like before we go to the formal, your teenage years? How was it in your home? How many, how large is your family? What was the environment you grew up in?
Right.
What? Yeah, I'd
Right.
love
That's
to know.
important. So I have a twin sister, and that's it for our family, for our parents. And our parents are very interesting in that my mother is not very highly educated, and by that I mean she's very, very fluent, very communicative in English. Our language at home is English predominantly and Hindi. And my father was the dean of Banaras Hindu University at one point. He was in the Second World War. Um, but it's interesting, my father was homophobic. So I had an uncle who was gay, and my father wouldn't even allow him in the house. And
Wow.
this was a very talented uncle. And not to say that I was very fond of him, I was as fond of him as I was of my other uncles. No difference there. But when my father found out I was gay, that's a very interesting story. But one of the things he said after that, he did an entire turnaround because he loved me so much. And he started saying, gay people are the best in the world. And I'm like, well, let's not swing all the way to the extreme just because you love your daughter so much. And he even at one time, remind me, I'll share this incident with you, when this female priest was hitting on me, and what
Wow.
his response was.
Okay, we'll come to that. We'll come to that.
Yeah,
I'm going to keep taking you back to
I
your
love
childhood.
it.
Okay,
Yeah,
Before we give the finale, we'll talk about this.
right,
So you said that your father at a year was homophobic. Now the term homophobic is so new, right? It's a modern term. We didn't know these terms.
right.
However, you grew up in an environment where your father may have told you that your uncle is gay, or were you aware that your uncle is gay and therefore he was not allowed into your family?
No, at
So,
the
so,
time, no.
so I'm just
This
trying to
is
understand
this is
Vasu.
later.
Yeah, so I'm
Yeah,
trying to understand Vasu as a young kid. What was the environment? How did she know that her father was homophobic, for instance?
right. So I'll just talk to you about my relationship with my parents. To start there. So there was a division of labor, if you will, in our family, where we were two kids being raised at the same time, having the same needs at the same time. And my father took me, and my mother took my sister. This was a kind of a divide and conquer strategy. So my daughter, your daughter, kind of deal. And I was obviously very, very close to my father. I used to sleep in his arms. And he used to read the AB journal. He was a bookseller. He used to read the AB journal, have me in the crook of his armpit and the other one. And he used to draw circles, slow circles on me until I fell asleep. And he used to love having me in his arms. So I grew up literally in my father's armpit, um, which is interesting. But this relationship with a father, when a girl child has this close relationship with her father, she has a different relationship with authority and with men, that of equality and affection. So we are not intimidated by the man's world, as it were. And neither is my sister, actually. But my father raised me with a lot of love. There was a little bit of my father had anger management issues. He's been through his own demons, and I'm actually writing about that in a graphic novel now, about the relationship between my father and I. Um, and we were very progressive in that my father would come out of the bathroom in a towel, wearing nothing but a towel. And we used to walk around in our socks and shirts, when we'd come back from school. Um, Apparently, my mother tells me this, when I got my beginner's bra, I went and showed my father. And I was very proud. I was like, "Look, Papa," and he told my mother, "Is like she's growing up now. Can you talk to her about not coming to me for everything?" Which I would go to him for everything. Um, he was the one who bought our sanitary napkins for the first time. So this is that kind of relationship, which is very, very unusual in India. Generally, fathers keep their daughters at an arm's distance. It's rare. It does happen. I've seen it happen. I've heard of it. That when fathers are very, very involved with their daughters and they sleep like that with them. I know of other instances when they are their baby. You know. So in that we were quite unusual. Um, and every evening my father would make, or was it morning? Every morning my father would make tea for my mother, which she didn't like because she didn't like the way he made tea. But he made it and she drank it. Um, and it was sometimes an acrimonious household because they didn't understand each other. Um, and it was an analytical difference which runs to this day. My father taught me analytical thinking and logical and rational, and my other side of the family has got nothing to do with reason. So that's how kind of we grew up. We were middle class. We initially lived in a rented house in Bengali Market in Delhi, and then we moved to East Delhi into our own small home. But it was like ground floor, first floor, and second floor, just split level. So
Sure.
these were the floors. So yeah.
So when you started, going to school, and you said that you had crushes, and you said you didn't really understand it, you welcomed it, but you didn't understand it, and like I know it for a fact that we didn't have a term called gay, lesbian, or
No.
queer, or so. How did you kind of? What about your other friends? Let's say, what about your other school friends? They also crushing, or were they talking about boys at that time?
Well, half the school was crushing on me.
Oh,
Okay, this is actually we have lots of stories about this because I was a sports figure, right? I was very stern, very disciplinarian. So because I was in the spotlight, so everyone was looking at me. That kind of thing. There was this one very interesting story when I got a phone call one evening at home, and this man said, "Are you, Vasu Didi?" And I said yes, and he said, "Can you please ask my daughter to wash her face? I'll put her on the phone because apparently you kissed her cheek 3 days ago and she hasn't washed her face since then."
so sweet.
So that's the, yeah, little innocent girls with big hearts, you know.
So while you were crushing on girls, girls were crushing on you. So obviously, so it was not unusual for girls to have crush on each other.
No,
Whereas,
and I wasn't
okay,
crushing on my peers. I was crushing on my teachers.
I see. So what I'm trying to get at, Vasu, because a lot of others that we've spoken with, it was unusual. Even if they went to a convent school and it was not co-ed, crushing on a person on the same gender was unusual because they thought there was something wrong with them because they couldn't. Everybody else was crushing on the opposite. So obviously, in your case, that didn't feel unusual because it
It
was
was
all
kind of normal. I mean,
no.
you crush on what you see around you,
So
you know.
interesting. So at what point did that change? And when you went to college, say after school, you went to college, did you go to a co-ed at that point, or was it? Did you
Yes, I did.
continue?
Yeah,
Okay.
to record
So did
college.
it change for you at that time? What happened? Just let us share. Yeah.
Um, at that time, I had a best friend in my class who was a man, um, and we were always together. If anyone wanted to know where I was, they would look for him. If they wanted to know where he was, they would look for me. So we were pretty much attached at the hip as buddies. We just, I don't know, just sort of fell in together. He was, I think, from Assam. Uh, and we used to do all our work together. In terms of crushes in college, I had none. I started having a boyfriend at the time, which was an interesting story. He's a very, very sweet man. Very, very sweet. Very caring, very sensitive. And he asked me to marry him eventually, and I said yes, and then I said no. Mm. And this was all the while I actually fell in love with a woman, not from the college, and continued having and well, the most we would do is kiss, right? We didn't know you could do anything else. All night long, we would kiss. Um, and then when I went to the US, um, when I was 21, I accidentally saw a film called The Incredible Adventures of Two Girls in Love. I accidentally walked into this relationship in Soho in New York, and I saw this film and I was like, she's not gonna kiss her, is she? She is. She's not gonna touch her, is she? She is. And I'm like, oh my god, that's what I am. And then I immediately turned around and told my mother. And when I went back to India and I went to my girlfriend and I made love to her for the first time, and she didn't quite know. I mean, she knew what we were doing, and um, when there were successful results, I told her, and she propped herself on her elbow and she said, "Oh, well, that was easy." And I was like, "No, it wasn't easy. I have loved you for years now. I'm not easy." So we had lots of interesting moments.
Interesting. So all the way through college, you didn't have a crush. You're saying you had a boyfriend. You
I
thought
had a
you,
girlfriend.
yeah, you had a
In,
girlfriend.
mm,
You had a girl, but you didn't really understand. So wait, at what?
no,
Because earlier when we just started the conversation, you said that you felt it was not normal. You used the word not natural. So
yeah.
why did you feel that?
So the definition of normal is the norm. What you see all the time. Like it's normal to look up and see that the sky is blue. If you see the sky is yellow one day, or green one day, or purple one day, it would be abnormal. Just that. Um, we did not also have we also had an absence of dialogue around people discussing it and saying it's inappropriate, right? So it didn't go into disapproved behavior, but it did went into the it doesn't exist.
Okay,
So by norm, that's what I mean, not
sure.
by that's abnormal, not the
Yeah,
religious
sure.
right.
Yeah, understand. So I'm just going to now draw a parallel. Now you're saying that at some point you started feeling towards women, and now this is before pre-US days. Okay, I'm talking about. So at
Mhm.
what point did your father talk about your uncle, and you discovered this whole homophobic reaction from your father? Was it before you went to the US, or after you went to the US?
Um, It might have been slightly before, but not when I was young, because these things aren't. I didn't notice that he wasn't coming home because we used to go over to our nanny's place, to our grandmother's place, and he was there, right? Which is usually what we do with our other uncles too, for the most part. So it's not something a child would notice, um, and not something you discuss with the child either. But when I grew up further, my mother told me that your father wouldn't let him in because he was gay. And that's another story. My relationship with my uncle, who later developed HIV, and you can put this later in the segment. But he developed HIV and he got so sick of people running from him. Like there was an incident of an HIV positive person going to Ames, and all the doctors dropped their tools and ran out of there because they didn't know at the time the how HIV might be AIDS might be transmitted. Um, and he got so sick of being treated like a pariah. In the US, I remember we were at the airport, my two uncles, my mother and I, and he had a drink on the table, and I just took the drink and drank from it just because I was thirsty, and everyone stopped. I mean, you could hear a pin drop, right? Um, and then he took to, when he would greet me, he would kiss me on my mouth, on my lips, which is very, very unusual. Indians don't do that. But I realized later that that was his attempt to say, I am not the living avatar of death.
Hmm.
I am human. I have feelings, and I would permit it because somewhere I understood that that's what he was trying to do. It wasn't about me or any gesture, because we don't kiss. Indians do not kiss on the mouth in greeting. But I made a few exceptions to people kissing me on my mouth over the years. I can count them on one hand, and he was one of them. And he trusted me with understanding his intent as well.
Sure. No, it's a beautiful story, and it's a story that people need to hear about, right? What others went through because of the misinformation or lack of information.
Right. And
Yeah,
phobias.
yeah, and that's how the phobias developed further, right? So I just want to understand, when you're in India, you're in love with a woman, which you later discover it's natural, it's fine to be, and then you come back from the US, meet her, and you get into an intimate relationship. But you were ready because you'd been to the US and you've watched this movie. Was that person ready for a relationship, or did she understand and did she connect with you in that way?
In retrospect, I realized that she loved me because she loved me. And not me, the gender, me, the person. And she would accept anything. If I was a man, she would accept me. If I was a woman, she would accept me because she loved me with all her heart. And was she ready for it? Yes. I mean, we loved each other. It wasn't one sided. We loved each other. And in fact, when we did kiss, she kissed me as well. I mean, so it took it to a little slightly higher level. Um, so yes, I mean, I wouldn't impose. In fact, quite the opposite, because I was aware of how much power I had. To this day, actually, um, if I am interested in somebody, I do not make the first move. I let them come meet me halfway. That's very important. It's kind of the credo of a gentleman, the way my father raised me.
Sure.
We do not um go up entirely. It kind of reminds me of a fellow comedian who was from Bangalore, who noticed and did a joke about this and said that Bangalore men don't hit on a woman, they hit around a woman. So they'll come and dance around you, hoping you notice them. It's a very gentle way of hitting on somebody. So I've been taught by my father to be a gentleman. So with her also, the first time we got slightly intimate, the first step of intimacy, when I took one step, she took one higher than that. So that's how I knew, because I wouldn't persuade.
So you didn't have to basically fight that fight, right? A lot of us had to, where we had to struggle with our partner's love. There was love, but that fear was there. This homophobic fear, internalized homophobia.
Right. Right. Yes, that if that happens, and my thing is, if there is any struggle within you, if all of you is not going in the direction of me, it's a no. If you're uncomfortable with it, it's a no. It's an absolute immediate for whatever reason. And all said and done, between her and me, we couldn't get married. We couldn't go forward because that would not be accepted by society. So that was as true for her as it was for me. But because I was in the US, then I didn't have the shackles of Indian society on me as much. And there are Indian people who have fought society, and it leads to such an additional burden on your mental health to do so. That said, I have worked in the US and I have been openly out, and I've had all manner of interesting responses all my life to sexuality in professional workspaces as well as personal ones. So,
So you obviously first came out to your mother when you watched the movie and you told her. How
right.
was how was her reaction, considering that you said that how you grew up? She was more with your twin sister than you.
Yeah, but she said it didn't surprise her. And which she already had a brother who's gay. So she's familiar with the concept and accepting of him and his partner. And we were very approving. Even my grandmother loved my mama's partner who was white because she liked all things white. Um, that's another story. But anything white, even a male white will do, you know. Yeah.
Oh, amazing. But tell me then, when did you come out? And I don't like using this term coming out, but I mean, coming out, when did you come out to your dad? And considering he had such a strong reaction to your
Yeah.
uncle, so how was his reaction?
It's one of the funniest stories, actually. So my mother wrote to my father. We were in New York at the time. She wrote to him and said that, this is what she said. And my father wrote to me. And he said, "You keep claiming you're." I wish I still had that letter, but I don't think I do. Um, you keep claiming you're a lesbian. He wrote Lesbion, crossed that out. Like, how do you spell this thing, right? Uh, Lesbian. But remember with a little twist and you're bi. So I died laughing. I'm like, as long as I sleep with a man, I can do whatever I want. He was like, no, no, I want you to know you have a choice. Whatever you choose, I'll respect that. And I said, Pa, you're assuming I've never slept with a man. And he's like, oh, right. But he has. And that has been a running credo. When I say my parents are unusual, this is one of the ways they're unusual. They have said, whether or not we understand what you're doing or why you're doing it, we will support you in it. That's our job.
How amazing.
And they have. They have. Even when I had two girlfriends or several girlfriends, and my mother would be like, Beta, what are these? All these girlfriends? Why don't you find one nice girl and settle down with her? So my parents take what they get, you
I
know.
love it. So, but then what about your sibling, your twin sister? How was the journey with her? And what did you like have to talk to her about it, or did she also already kind of know?
So uh, she's over time become anti me because when we were children, people used to compare us all the time, and they used to say, "Well, she used to tell her, why can't you be like your sister?" Because I used to come first in everything and all of that, overachiever, and she hated that, understandably so. Except she grew to hate me. That was not my fault, um, which pretty much continues to this day. So anything I did was disapproved of. So yeah, that story has never been a pleasant one.
Okay. So you know, most of us have our siblings to go to if we have siblings to have convers. Even as a kid, you did have that.
When we were kids, we used to play sister sister and kiss each other when we were very very little. But that's because of that comparison. It pretty much ended. That said, when we were growing up, because we're twins, if she would get sick, I would get the symptoms. If she got hurt here, I would feel it there. And it was so well known that when she started dating and going out with boys and say she was out late night, my mother would wake me and say, "How are you feeling?" And I'd be like, "Mom, she's fine. Go back to sleep." Right. So that was how well known that was and how well established that was in our family. But I never got any of the pleasure. And if I got sick, she didn't feel anything.
So wow. So you said you also talked about getting varied responses in the US to your sexual identity.
Yeah.
Did you feel that the energy in the US was quite different, or the and versus India, of course. So did you have to hide yourself in India and go and live your liberal life in the US?
Right. So here's the thing. First, let me um, situate that. It's not fair to say all of US because I went from New York to Los Angeles, and these are blue states. So everybody around me was loving and supportive. But if I was, say, in Texas or in Mississippi or other maybe Midwestern states, from the stories we know, things and acceptability would probably have been different. Maybe there would have been another layer of prejudice around me. As it was, being in Los Angeles, San Francisco, New York, I was loved and welcomed by my American counterparts. In India, whether I was accepted. Now, here's the thing, this is the groundwork my parents laid. And uh, they established enough confidence behind me and that they would support me, right? Their support, with their support, everybody accepted and respected my choices. And I remember there was one auntie, neighbors, one auntie uh, who said, "Beta, what is this? What is this relation? What is this relationship with a woman?" And I said, "I love her. She loves me the way you love your husband. Oh, actually, the way your husband does not love you. Um, he was abusive, actually. So it was that we love each other in every way, including physically." She said, "Okay, beta, I don't understand it, but if you get married to a woman, I will come."
Oh,
Right? I mean,
well,
you can't expect more than that. You just can't. And then there was another auntie who was really funny. I came out to her when I was in the US and she was in India, and she went running over to my mother and said, "Indra, I had no idea. If you need any help, you let me know." And my mother said, "Looks like you're the one who needs help."
but what help was she offering? I want to know.
I don't know. Ease the pains away. Do you need a hot pack or a cold pack to put somewhere? I don't know what kind of help that was. Dealing with this disease, maybe. But everybody, because my parents laid that foundation,
Yes.
and my rule, and with the somatic therapy I've done as well, and boundaries, the rule is that you may enter my personal life in any capacity, professional, personal, any capacity, being a friend, as long as you respect and honor me and my choices. So if I bring a new girlfriend in, uh, she is automatically accepted by everybody. Whether it's, I mean, if I have a second girlfriend, if I have two girlfriends, it's a very problematic and very delicate issue. But my friends will struggle with it, and they will tell me, "You're completely off your mind." And I'll tell them what situation this is, because this is not a practice of mine. But if there's an extenuating circumstance, and they would respect, even though they don't agree with. Same thing that my parents did. So I am surrounded by people who honor my choices, and we laugh about how stupid it is, or how difficult it is, or how stupid you are. In so many words, they'll say you are an idiot.
Very
Right?
good. So, but Vasu, so you're telling me that you really didn't go through the stuff that most of us have been through, the nonsense, like, abuse and the slurs and the ridiculous comments people make on your face.
Ridiculous comments, yes. Very, very
Yeah,
funny. Very,
yeah.
very funny. There was one when she was the president of the CPA Association of California. And she has a mansion of a house, a swimming pool, everything. And I said, "You might want to see India Post Television today." She said, "Why?" I said, "Because I'll be on it." She said, "Why?" I said, "Because of the LA SAGLBT community." And she said, "What's that?" I said, "The Los Angeles South Asian gay, lesbian, transgender community." There was silence at the other, and she was a member of my board. She's like, "But you never told me." And I was like, "Well, I was asking you to be on the board of my environmental nonprofit. It's not appropriate for me to say, would you be on the board? I'm gay. It's environmental work. It's got nothing to do with my sexuality." She's like, but then you have AIDS." And I was like, "Well, not particularly." He said, "No, that's where it comes from. It comes from the gays, you know." I said, "Well, it probably comes from monkeys in Africa." But she's like, but then, are you attracted to me?" And that's the first one, right? Do you have good taste? Um, and I was like, "Well, no." She says, "No." She says, "What do you look for in a woman?" And I said, "Well, I look for someone with a sense of humor." She said, "I have a great sense of humor." Um, I look for someone who's kind. I'm very kind. I'm very. So you're saying if I wasn't married and then you and I could have done something? And I was like, well, I don't quite think of you like that. Um, and another one, when I was at UCLA, my roommate, she was Turkish. And when she came in, I told her, look, I'm gay. In case you have a problem with that, you can have yourself be reassigned to another room. And at first, she wouldn't take her clothes off in front of me. Like, she wouldn't change in front of me in case, like, I jumped her or something. And when she got to know me, then she would take off her. She would be in her underwear, her bra and underwear, and she would drape herself on her bed, open out her hair, and she would say, Vasu, come, sit here, come here. Are you attracted to me? And I would say, well, you're a very attractive woman. But unfortunately, she knew the difference between that and what she was asking. And she would say, no, are you attracted to me? And I was like, you're not quite my type. But it was so funny. It's just the cutest thing. Um, but yeah, no, in terms of absolute slurs, no, and I don't think that we permit it. In my world, it's not permitted. You want to have your opinion, you're welcome to it. You don't have to hang out with me. Nobody made you. And I'm not going to shove it down your throat either.
But
But
you're an exception, Vasu, because see, when people share slurs or abuse, they don't take permission, and sometimes it's not in your control. They may be
right.
just walking on the street and say things to you.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. There was once I was walking with a friend who was straight, and we were just holding hands because we hadn't seen each other. In the Indian thing, hold hands.
yeah,
Walking down Manhattan, and somebody said, "Get a room." And I was like, "We don't need a room. What do you mean get a room?"
yeah, yeah.
So it's just silly. It's silly. And they say, you shouldn't point fingers because um, they say that there are three fingers pointing back at you. I didn't understand what that meant, but now I do. It means that this is something I read. This is not something I made up. It's brilliant. It says, "I am not who you think I am. You are who you think I am." So
Yeah.
you're just telling me who you are.
Yeah.
And yes, it's mutual. I don't want to hang out with you either.
Exactly. I say that. I say that, when people say things to you, they're revealing a part of themselves, right?
Correct.
So they're
Correct.
just showing you who they are. It's not about you, it's about them. So you have to just shut up and listen and watch, observe. And like you said, if you have self respect, you stay grounded, it's yours. Otherwise, just let it
Correct.
go. It took a long time. It's called self worth. It took a
Yes.
long time for me to understand that, Vasu,
Yes.
so it's interesting to hear the other side. I'm going to ask you two things that I'm very curious about. One is, do you find yourself coming out on a daily basis to people? When I say daily basis, very often, you have to say who you are.
Yeah, this is true. This is true. It's a running theme for most queer people because we keep meeting new people. And when we do, there is a point of trust when we are incumbent on telling the other person because we've gotten so close. Because if you put that point off too late, then they'll be like, well, why didn't you tell me before? Don't you trust me? I mean, of course I'm fine with it. So it can't be done too soon. Hi, I'm gay. um it can't be done too late. So yeah, we do that on a regular basis, but for now it's become almost second nature because when we're talking, I'll occasionally say something like my partner, um, and the thing about the US is that our straight allies have also started using partner, because they have said that if you can't say husband and wife, neither can I. So they add to that argument so valiantly. So they're so gallantly. So when we say partner, it always leaves that this is not a this might not be a conventional, or in this case it's been made a conventional relationship. So but it doesn't matter. The bottom line is where we are now with the kinds of people we have. It doesn't matter. In fact, they would like to meet her, and they would say, when are we meeting, if that's appropriate, right? So it's I'm at a point where I've built this world of respect and honor around me. So these things don't They don't matter. At the level we interact in, it
Yeah.
doesn't matter.
I agree with you. In our case, I remember Nicola and I work 24/7 together, and we're business partners as well. So
Right.
when I introduce them to people in India, mostly
My
this is the
partner. This
my
is my
partner.
partner.
No, no, मतलब business partner. Now they say no, no, my partner. Then you have
Other
to
thing
kind of
also.
say life partner, and then you
This
can just
is
see it on their faces, like it just drops, and either they
how.
want to, like, how do you do it? Anyway, so the other thing is, I want that story, your
Use your
dad's story.
imagination. Yeah.
I know, huh? No, no. Google. I mean, that's, when I used to start, when I was giving talks a lot initially and on these Insta lives in lockdown that happened, I got sick of it because the first thing that people would ask, suddenly you would have all these fans and followers, so called, and asking, how do you do it? I said, such voyeuristic conversations
Right.
because if you're on, I'm sure you're watching whatever that Pornhub or whatever 24 hours a day, but you want to know how do you do it because you feel that you can ask. Will you ask that to a heterosexual couple? You know?
Exactly. Well, because they know how that works, primarily. But once I remember on my Facebook page, I have like hundreds of, well, thousands of followers, like 80,000. And I had posted something, and then somebody wrote in there, "Do you know she's gay? Not that it's important to me." And somebody wrote and said, "If it's not important to you, then why are you bringing it up?" Right. So I have very logical people on my, you know,
I've also learned this. You just leave it for the others to respond to these comments. You
right.
don't have to. But I want to hear about
Uh-huh.
that, your dad's story about the priest, the female priest who
Oh
hit
yeah.
on you.
Yeah. So this is hilarious, right? So my parents and I, we go to some Udaipur, Jodhpur kind of city, and um, everybody there is crying about some problem they have to the head of the Sindhi mutt, the Sindhi priest, high priest. And my mother also gets into it, and she's like, "Oh yeah, we don't know what to do. She's gay." I'm like, "Mom, you never complained about that before. Don't start now."
So, Vasu, may I interrupt you? Sorry, sorry. I
Mm.
just can you explain to the audience what a Sindhi is and what a Sindhi mutt is, please?
I didn't know myself. Sindhi is people who hail from Sindh in India, which is now in Pakistan. So my parents were Sindhi from Sindh, like a Punjabi is from Punjab. And Punjab and Sindh are actually quite close to each other, and both of them are business communities as well. So there's quite a few similarities and competition, rivalry that goes on between these two communities. Um, so a mutt is like a temple, like a faith-based organization. And she was very highly respected, very highly respected. So we go in there, and she's like, "Oh, my daughter's gay. I don't know what to do about her." But I don't think it landed the way it was supposed to land, because the head priest came into my room and tried to kiss me. I was like, "Oh, good." Um, and I was like, "Oh, no, 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 no. It doesn't work this way. It doesn't work like this. You gay, I gay together. That's how some straight people believe. It's like, oh, you're gay. I'll introduce you to her, and then you'll be very happy in a couple." No, no, it's not going to happen. And then I told my father about it. Um, and he said, "Oh, yeah, it's okay. It's okay to kiss around a little bit." And I'm like, "Pa, I'm seeing this other girl. If she finds out I kiss somebody else, she's going to break my knees. If you want to give me advice as your son, at least give me advice that doesn't get me killed." He's like, "No, kissing is okay. Doesn't matter." And then this woman sent second in command to us and told my parents that you should be very fortunate that the priest herself is taking personal interest in your daughter, and she is willing to see her in her private chambers. And she tried to give a gold chain to my mother. And I'm like, "You're not accepting it. I'm not going. I know what this is about." Like, it's hilarious. It's completely backfired. My mother tried to,
So I want to
and
know what
at,
happened.
at some point in my life, my mother said, "These things happen only to you." And this wasn't about this. This is about everything else. These things happen only to me. So, yeah. Welcome to my life, which is why I'm a comedian.
Chick magnet, should, as they say. So,
I
so
was like, they're always, especially the virgins, they're very drawn to me. And I'm like, oh God. Even guys, right? At UCLA, there was this one guy. He had turquoise eyes. I'd never seen turquoise, not blue, turquoise eyes. Beautiful. So he would follow me around and he would follow me to my room. And I'm like, what are you doing? And he says, I'm a woman. And I said, I'm going to find out very quickly that you're not. So it was just very cute but enchanting, enchanting. I've had men come on to me in such sweet ways. Like there was once I was wearing African braids, like had long hair and very thin braids with beads on them, because I respect the African American culture. And I was taking a bus and sitting at a bus stop. There was this one black man who came up to me and mouthed, "I really want to fuck you." And I said, "Thank you." It's a compliment, and he walked away, and that's it. It's sweet.
yeah,
you know
yeah, it's how we see, the lens we wear, right? That's
no, the
important.
words too. He didn't mean disrespect.
No, no,
He just
that's
said
what I'm
you're looking
saying.
beautiful.
No, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
We can take offense to everything these days, and
Oh yeah,
and that's what I was trying to say. I was on your side,
I
and I
object.
understand to everything. If I say this, it will be, "How did you sit like that? Why are you wearing white frames? Why are you wearing white shirt?" I take offense.
Oh
Okay.
yeah.
And so, Vasu, before we leave, we've already run out of time, and I'm just thinking, my God, I could listen to you forever. But tell me, this new generation, and I know that you lived in India, now you're in the US. This new generation, we've got so many different things happening. There's pronouns, which I respect as well.
Right,
There are these subcultures, what you call a
right,
stratification of
right.
within our own community. How do you deal with that, or do you have to even bother?
Right. It is getting increasingly, since I'm a corporate trainer as well, it's getting increasingly more complex. And you pretty much need a PhD to understand it. Um, but I think the bottom line should be, I mean, if you say, for instance, you look at the color green, if you really want to get into the technicality of it, the Japanese have probably found 100,000 shades of green. Now, do you want to classify all of them? Or would it be easier to take a different approach and say that all our differences, just like if you're vegetarian, non vegetarian, you wear glasses, you don't wear glasses, so you're like eyesight disabled or compromised, as that is in the normal vernacular of a company or society, then perhaps this should be as well. And it's just normal. The moment you make it normal, then you don't have to discuss it, sign and die. When it is not the other, it is not defined as different from us, and has to be dealt with differently or with kid gloves. I've been told by several men that we can't even give compliments to women anymore, and we're afraid to in case they take offense and file a suit against us. So, how far is this going to go? I think the intent is very important here. And when the intent is of friendliness, and as a comedian, I say that we can say anything in a show. We can even say something that can be very likely or very probably be perceived as insult, but because it's not delivered as such, it's not taken as such. So we need to really look at the intent here rather than in subclassifications. And some companies have given up and said LGBTQI, right? A, and then LGBT plus. It's like the plus covers everything, and everything else you'll come up with as well.
Yeah,
So I
yeah,
have progressive trainings I have a flow chart of this, and then it can fall into these categories. And within that, this can fall into this category and this category. And if you haven't done your PhD in sexuality studies, then
yeah. I mean,
um,
it's quite. I find it quite difficult and challenging, even because we are one of the voices in the community, people expect us to know everything. I'm like, I get shared pronouns. By the way, my pronouns are she, her, they, them,
right.
and I'm thinking during my conversation, how am I going to call you her and she, and then suddenly I have to get into they and them? But I am also very aware that I have to respect that, and I do respect
Of
that.
course.
But it confuses the hell out of me.
But if the
It,
respect comes with inclusion,
yeah.
and we just and yes, gender is something that we haven't looked at adequately as a
Yes.
society. Yes, we do need to look into. Yes, do need to ask somebody, how would you like to be referred to, um, uh, rather than skirt around the issue. So if somebody prefers, in fact, even 20 years ago, I had a friend in Los Angeles who preferred to be called it. He was male, he had long hair, he would wear skirts, and he was completely against this gender classification, this binary classification. He says, you refer to me as it doesn't matter, right? So yes, we need to have this conversation, and we keep educating ourselves from the diversity backgrounds that are now becoming the foreground, which is excellent. So yes, we do need to be, but I think the intent needs to be shifted more than the content.
I agree with you. I mean, this is a longer conversation. At some point, I would love to have you on a discussion panel, Vasu, because I think these are important conversations, right? People, when they get to know I'm a lesbian and I say I talk about my children, they even ask, oh, but you're a lesbian. How can you have children?
Right.
So there
Well,
is
if
this.
they can accept Mary and Immaculate Conception, what's wrong with considering the same thing with you?
No, but you see, like I say that I think you missed your biology class. Obviously you slept through it. But these are things that people are not aware of for whatever reason. So
This
imagine then asking them about more complex things. Sorry, go
this
on.
was one thing that I'd heard in the US a long time ago that I've never forgotten because how brilliant it was. They said, "You're lesbian, but don't you want to have kids?" And that woman had said, "Heck, we keep trying."
So on that note, Vasu, is there anything you want to leave for our audience? You want to say some last beautiful words of wisdom?
So what I would say is, for both the queer community and the non-queer community, is for the queer community, I would say we should step out of, if you're taking offense and stuff, to normal statements or conventional statements. Let's give it a little bit of slack. Um, there is enough offense in the world. And if somebody is communicating with you and blundering, they're trying. They're trying. They might not know the vernacular, they might not know how to, but they're trying. And yes, you are not the educator for the entire world, of course, it's not your mandate. At the same time, if we recognize the intent, then we can have a friendlier conversation. And for the non-queer community, I would say please ask, and there's ways to ask. And you would even say, this is what I do in trainings as well, is you would approach somebody and say, I found out that you're queer, or you're openly of an alternative sexuality or gender, and I honestly don't know much about it, and it's not your responsibility to educate me. Can you point me towards some resources, or would you be willing to have a conversation with me? And if you are willing to have a conversation with me, may I ask you a few questions that may be offensive, but I don't mean the offense? Would you forgive me in advance and let me know not to repeat this again? And I won't. So, you have to contextualize it, because you are getting into an informal education here. I mean, and it is everyone's responsibility to know these. It is our
Fantastic.
responsibility.
It is. It is a collective responsibility, as you said, Vasu. Fantastic conversation. I mean, we learned about you and your coming out story and journey, but so much more as well. So thank you very much,
My
Vasu, for
pleasure. Thank
joining
you for
us.
having me. Yeah.
Nicola, thank you for your support in the back end and for bringing this together. We cannot forget Nicola. And
Yes.
we've got two partners. One is a digital partner, Digital Fix, who put this all together for us, and they do social media. So thank you, Duraya and team. Herbal Theory, I wish you were in India because Herbal Theory is a partner. I'm happy to send it to your home, okay, in
Hmm.
India. So it's a
Hmm.
small packet, but it's a beautiful organic packet. And I know that you love organic stuff, Vasu, and you do a lot of work in this space
Yeah.
apart from your comedy and corporate talks and somatic therapy that you
Mm.
do.
Mm.
Yeah, so let us know, send your address to us.
Sure.
And audience, thank you as you always for participating, listening to us. Your feedback is very welcome. Any thoughts, any questions for Vasu, please share on the viewsroom at gmail.com. Remember my words, closets of our clothes, not to hide your truth. I always say that. And thank you again, Vasu. Thank you for joining us.
Thank
Remember,
you.
I'm totally out now.
Thank you.